You're standing in a backyard on a July night, paper plate in one hand, a hot dog cooling on it, and the sky cracks open above you in red and white and blue. Somebody's grill is still going. A neighbor has a small flag stuck in the grass. Every American has been in some version of this exact scene. Same date, same fireworks, same vague sense that we're celebrating something that happened in 1776. But have you ever wondered, why July 4? What actually happened on that date? And why does one of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence think we picked the wrong day? Because the real story is that America voted for independence 2 days earlier, and the date on your calendar is, technically speaking, a publishing deadline. To understand why you're standing in that backyard on the 4th and not the 2nd, we have to go back to a sweaty room in Philadelphia in the summer of 1776. The Second Continental Congress was meeting in the Pennsylvania State House, the building you now know as Independence Hall. No air conditioning, windows shut against horseflies, men in wool coats arguing in a room that grew hotter every afternoon. And they were not yet agreed on independence. Some delegates were ready, others were waiting on new instructions from their colonies back home. Then, on June 7th, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia stood up and introduced a resolution. The colonies, he said, are and of right ought to be free and independent states. That sentence is the actual hinge of American history, not a document, a motion on the floor. The motion sat there for almost a month. Delegates wrote home, minds changed. A small committee was assigned to draft an explanation just in case the resolution passed. A young Virginian named Thomas Jefferson did most of the writing. And then, on July 2nd, 1776, Congress voted. 12 colonies in favor. New York abstained, awaiting instructions. The Lee resolution carried. That, right there, that vote in that hot room, is the legal moment America declared itself independent. The next morning, John Adams sat down to write his wife Abigail. He was elated. He told her that the second day of July 1776 would be the most memorable epocha in the history of America. He predicted it would be celebrated generations later with what he called pomp and parade, bonfires and illuminations, cannon, bells, sports. He was, in essence, inventing the holiday in his head as he wrote. He named the wrong day. John Adams, sitting at a desk in Philadelphia in the summer of 1776, a man who had just helped vote for independence, predicted the date of the holiday we'd be celebrating 2.5 centuries later, and he was off by 48 hours. Here's what's strange about that. The thing we call the Declaration of Independence wasn't the decision at all. It was the explanation, a press release more or less, justifying a vote that had already happened. The decision was July 2nd. The document was something else. And on July 4th, 2 days after the actual vote, Congress finished editing Jefferson's draft and formally adopted the wording of that explanation. That date, July 4th, 1776, got printed across the top of the page. That night, a Philadelphia printer named John Dunlap pulled an all-nighter setting type. By the morning of July 5th, copies, the Dunlap broadsides as historians now call them, basically single-sheet printed posters, were on horseback heading out to every colony. Every single one had July 4th stamped at the top. And here's where the story gets a little stranger. You've probably seen the famous painting, the one by John Trumbull, 56 solemn men gathered around a table, quills in hand, signing the Declaration on July 4th. Almost nobody signed it that day. The clean, calligraphy-perfect version of the Declaration, the engrossed copy, that's the formal, hand-lettered original you can go see at the National Archives, wasn't even ready on July 4th. The major signing happened on August 2nd. A few delegates signed weeks later. That painting in your high school textbook is a stitched-together fiction, a beautiful one, but a fiction. The date on the paperwork beat the date of the decision. The announcement out-traveled the act. By July 8th, Philadelphia was holding the first public reading. Bells rang, a small parade marched. They were already celebrating on the wrong date. The next summer, in 1777, Philadelphia added fireworks. By the early 1800s, July 4th was a fixture of American civic life. Speeches, picnics, militias firing muskets into the sky. And then, something happened that turned the date from a habit into a kind of myth. July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary exactly of the Declaration's adoption. That day, John Adams died at his home in Massachusetts. A few hours earlier, hundreds of miles away in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson had also died. Two of the men most responsible for the document, the man who predicted the wrong holiday and the man who wrote the words, gone on the same day, on the 50th anniversary of the date one of them had insisted his whole life was incorrect. 5 years later, James Monroe died on July 4th, too. After that, you couldn't argue with July 4th anymore. The date had stopped being a date. It had become something closer to fate. Congress made it an unpaid federal holiday in 1970 and a paid one in 1938. By then, it was untouchable. For roughly 2.5 centuries, hundreds of millions of Americans have organized their summers around a date that one of the founders, on the record in his own handwriting, said was the wrong one. Which raises the obvious question: why did July 4th win? Why did the 2nd of July, the actual day of the vote, get quietly buried under the 4th? The simplest answer is that the document traveled and the decision didn't. The vote happened in a closed room in front of a few dozen men. The document, printed, dated, riding out on horseback in hundreds of copies, reached every town with July 4th at the top. People celebrated what they could see, and what they could see said July 4th. And the part most people want to know, did Adams ever get over it? By some accounts, no. He's said to have refused invitations to July 4th celebrations for the rest of his life on principle. He'd remind people, anyone who'd listen, that the real day had been July 2nd. And then he died on the 4th. The country won the argument, gently and completely. Which is what Independence Day really is when you look at it close up. It's the paper anniversary, the day the words made it official, even though the decision had already happened 2 days before. So the next time you're standing in that backyard, paper plate in one hand, fireworks cracking open the sky above you, you'll know. Somewhere up there, the 2nd of July is still drifting around, unobserved, and John Adams, wherever he is still a little annoyed about it. Thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments, if you could pick the real Independence Day, would you side with John Adams and go with the 2nd? Or are you with the rest of us, hot dog in hand, on the 4th? Thanks for joining us for another piece of Heirloom History. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more of the small habits, phrases, and traditions that became Heirloom History.